rotate the crank to a place where I can easily put some plastic gauge in between these counterweights. The back counterweight that gets in the way. Maybe right about there. Wipe the oil off. So now I have a clean place to put plastic gauge on each bearings, or each on each journal without hitting an oil hole. So in a prior video during the disassembly, I laid down some plastic gauge, torqued down the caps, and I believe the clearances were, and that was with the original bearings. I believe the clearances were somewhere between 3 and 4 thousandths. I think the all but the rear main were 3 thousandths. I think there's 4 thousandths on the rear. Let's go back and check. But anyway, we've got the new bearings installed. We'll see what they give us. No work has been done to the crank, and these are standard sized bearings. So I just kind of winged it, went with the standards. We'll see what that gives us. Be more concerned about too much clearance than not enough, given how freely the crank rotates. But we'll see in a few minutes. By the way, these still have oil on them too. I should wipe these down as well. Number 4. Forward. Number 3. So I've got my plastic gauge in place. Little reddish pink line there. And here's the markings I made earlier in the caps. There's the other two. 2 dots, 1 dot. Grab number 1. Arrow facing forward. Number 2. Arrow facing forward. Set to 70 foot-pounds. All right, now let's see what the plastic gauge reads. See about the back of the rear. Yeah, so between 3 and 4 thousandths in the back. Check number 4, about 3 thousandths. 2 thousandths on this one. Let's see if that's across the whole bearing. This one might be a little tight. Let's see between 2 and 3 thousandths. Check this one. Probably around 2 thousandths. I'd say between 2 and 3 thousandths. Probably closer to 2. And on the front, I'm going to say 3. Let's see, I got a glare. Yeah, 2 thousandths. So we got what? 2 thousandths, 2 thousandths, 3 thousandths. Maybe 2. 3 and 3. So let me jot that down real quick. I'm just going to write it on the block. So we got 2 thousandths, 2, 2, 2, and then 3. Okay. And as far as the crank goes, well, first off, I have to look up what the specs are. I don't know what the tolerances should be, what the recommended clearances are for the main bearings. I'll have to look that up. And then still need to measure end play. And that'll give me the clearance back here for the thrust bearing. In fact, I'm going to clean up the plastic gauge, torque the caps back down again, and then measure end play. A few drops of oil. And I want to make sure that I'm oiling the face of the thrust bearing as well, the back main. All right. Make sure to put these back in the right spot. 3, 1, 2, 3. Four. I should have measured the end play before I untorqued everything, put in the plastic gauge, but I forgot. Now I want to make sure that the crank is sitting in a position where it's giving the most end play. So let's seat it all the way in the back, seat it forward. Now it might only move a few thousandths, but that might be all we need. Closer. All right. Let's start. Over at the front. Over at the back. Let's see if we get any movement. Bring you in here in a minute once I get this settled. right, so starting at 0 again. The max we get is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, between 5 and 6 again. If I can read, my eyes are crossing. About 4. Between 4 and 5. Let's call that 4.5. The recommended clearance for main bearings is around 1/1000th of an inch for every inch of journal diameter. And I measure roughly 2.448 thousandths. So it's 2.448. So if we do some math, let's see here. If we take 1/1000th times my journal size, we come up with a little over 2/1000ths. I'm measuring using the plastic gauge between 2 and 3/1000ths. So I, in my opinion, am right in the sweet spot roughly. The front 1, 2, 3 are just a hair tight, but then again, the plastic gauge isn't that accurate, so I'm not too worried about that. And as far as thrust bearing clearance for crankshaft end play, I saw a recommendation of 4 to 5/1000ths of an inch, and I measured 4.5 thousandths using a dial indicator. So I would say, as far as the mains are concerned, end play, bearings, I'm good to go. I still have to measure the rings that I have, the piston rings for the bores, because I did hone them out. I don't expect much of a difference, but I just want to make sure that the end gaps are within spec and they're not too tight. Again, I just went with stock bearing sizes and stock piston size and stock piston rings. So I think they'll fit, but I just want to measure. I don't want to find out the hard way after putting all this together, putting it back in the motor, spending the money just to blow up the motor. So I'll take some measurements and we'll see. Grab one of these bad boys. Actually labeled top. Looks like it's laser engraved. Interesting. Let's get this bad boy in here. Make sure we have the right side up. Press it down evenly. That's pretty good. It's actually pretty good. Oh, it's too tight. All right. So we got a ring gap of about 25 thousandths. That should be 25 hundredths, not thousandths. It's 25 hundredths. Yeah, that's pretty good. So that's 25 hundredths. Let's take the same ring, all the other cylinders. Really interested to see this last one that had all this rust. Alright, so here's my ring gaps. This one's really bad because I did a lot of honing in here, trying to get rid of some of this pitting from the rust. But otherwise, we are at between 22 hundredths and 25 hundredths ring gap. Pretty much across the board, except for this one. So I'm just expecting to not have very good compression in this back cylinder. So that would be cylinder 7. Make a note of that. So I'm going to install my the front main seal and timing cover. So I got some, I don't know what you call them, bushings, whatever, from my handy dandy camshaft and crankshaft seal tool kit. So I just found the ones that fit the best. Here's a seal. This one, in my opinion, seems to fit pretty good. And then over here in the press, piece of wood, another one of those bushings. Seems to fit pretty good under here. Center that a little better, like so. Now it's just a matter of putting the two together. See how this goes. Keep that centered. That's good. Center everything. Let's give it a shot. Alright, make sure everything's seated evenly, which it's not, so I'll back off a little bit. That's better. feels pretty evenly centered. And we'll just press away. And I can feel it seated. So back it off. And there we go. I believe that is fully seated. Yep. Looks good to me. Done. Time for paint. Alright, so while I'm waiting for the paint to dry on my oil pan and my timing cover, I figured I'd install the cam bearings. So I bought an Engine Tech, turn this upside down there, an Engine Tech motor kit. So, you know, it's got all the gaskets in it. And it came with pistons, all the bearings, piston rings, so on and so forth. Well, cam bearings have to be installed in a certain order based on the manufacturer's recommendations, and there's no documentation in the cam bearing box. So I called Engine Tech, and their answer was, hey, sorry, but you know, we don't support the general public. Great. So they don't stand behind their products if you buy something online. They gave me the phone number of a local machine shop, and the guy's like, yeah, we don't even use their bearings. So long story short, I was able to go onto Rock Auto's website, and if you dig up the part number, in this case CC400, these are small block chevy cam bearings. Then on the second page of the information tab, I found this guy, and I don't know if this will come through clearly or not. If not, I'll bring it up on the screen in a separate image. But this tells the position of the cam bearings based on their number, and the numbers are cast or stamped. Get one of these out. The numbers are stamped here. Where is it? Right here. So for instance, I don't know if that'll show in the camera or not, but this one's stamped 8-2615. Or is that a 13? I don't know. My eyes are bad, but the point is it says 26. So 26, that goes in the first cam slot, cam bearing slot. The other ones are labeled accordingly, or they're stamped accordingly. So I got 28, 28, 27, and another 27. So I'm just going to use this guide. Good enough. It's from the manufacturer. So this should be what I need. I don't know why Engine Tech couldn't provide that information, but buyer beware. If you buy Engine Tech, don't expect their tech support to give you any support. Alright, so I'm getting ready to install the cam bearings. I'm just going to give everything a good wipe down with some acetone before I install them. Make sure there's no grime left inside the boards here. Get rid of any residual junk that might be in there. Kind of tough getting your hand in there. It's not easy if you got fat hands. Alright, put the back one from the back of the block, that'll be a lot easier. So I thought. I can't get my hand back there either. All right, so everything I've been reading about cam bearing installation for small block recommends installing the cam bearing oil hole at roughly 2 o'clock. So for instance, here's the hole. Looking at the front of the block, it should be off to about that position roughly. Here's the oil hole. So what I'm going to do is mark the block. Let's say that's 12 o'clock. This is probably closer to 2 o'clock, which kind of lines up with this oil galley. This recommendation is for, and I think it's an important distinction, for blocks that have a groove in the bore itself for the bearings, like this block has. My understanding is some of the earlier blocks, some of the earlier small block Chevys, do not have this groove, which is an oil groove that runs around the full circumference of the cam bore here. On those earlier blocks that do not have this groove, then it's vital to have the hole in the cam bearing line up with the hole in the block, because that's the only way your cam bearing is going to get oil. That's not the case with these newer blocks though. I say newer. This block's from '84 and it has that groove in the bore. So I'm going to follow the recommendation of 2 o'clock. I don't know any better, so I'm just going to do what people that are smarter than me do. With that said, I will just loosely place the hole at my 2 o'clock mark, and I'll put a little mark on the bearing referencing the say 6 o'clock mark, because when I turn the block upside down, all of this is going to change orientation. So this way I know that my cam bearing's in with the hole facing what would be 2 o'clock here, but when the block is spun upside down, as long as my line is facing me straight up and down, then my hole should be at 2 o'clock. So I'm going to do this with each of the bearings regardless of the order they're in, except for the one that has 2 holes in it. And this is 26, which, according to my handy dandy info sheet, 26 goes in position 1. And with 2 holes in it, I'm going to make a judgment call and say I'm going to split the difference. There's an oil hole in the top and the bottom. If I put this oil hole at 2 o'clock roughly, then I am almost at 10 o'clock right here. So let's do that. And I'll mark the bottom here. Alright, so again, line up 12 o'clock. A little indexing mark. 12 o'clock, the 2 o'clock, and my little index mark. All right. Got my bearings marked. Turn the motor around. And let's give it a shot. Start with the rear bearing. All right, so the back bearing is a 27. Here's a 27. So this goes in the back. I'll take my black mark, make sure it's facing up, and that'll index my bearing hole at the 2 o'clock when the motor is sitting upright. Make sure this install tool is clean. So just a light coat of engine oil. Good enough. Insert the tool. Slip my bearing on. Line everything up. So my black line, it looks off in the camera lens. Maybe just because of shadows. There we go. Oops. But my black line standing roughly up and down, which would be at the 12 o'clock position with the motor upside down. So make sure it's sitting in the bore right. So if you're going to use this method, make sure that you've installed the bearing facing the right way. Otherwise, your oil hole will be off, complete opposite to your index mark. See? So now my index mark is facing up and down. So if we rotate it so that it's facing down, we're now at the 2 o'clock position. With it flipped around the other way, it was on this side instead of this side. Hopefully that makes sense. I'll try to grab the tool. Make sure everything's aligned. And let's give it a few taps. Make sure everything's going in right. Don't want any binding. I think we look good. call that one done. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 more to go. One, two, three, four. See, position 4 should be a 28. Here's a 28. Make sure my witness mark is correct. Yep. Slip it on in. Give it another drop of lube. All right. Cam bearings indexed. Up top, oil hole lines up the block. Let's meet the two. Make sure the line is facing up. Drop it in place. And let's send it. So in order to get the front cam bearing in front, I had to take the motor off the stand. So right now it's just hanging off my cherry picker. That way I can support the back half of the bearing installation tool, this guy here, within a cam bearing. And that will guide me as I drive the front bearing in, keeping me nice and square. See how that looks. Call that good. And I've got 2 more left. To clean this off a little bit before each bearing, just to prevent any possible shavings getting on the next bearing. So that's 1, this is 2. According to my paper, position 2 calls for a 27. 27. Make sure I'm indexed correctly. Nope. Turn the bearing around. Yep. All right. Drop it in place. Make sure everything's seated. I've got my black mark facing up. That should align my oil hole. And time to send it. Got one more left. That'll be number 3, right? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I started to drive this one home. You can barely see it, but it says 28 right here. I started driving this one home and realized that it wasn't indexed correctly, so I backed it out from the other side. But got the right one. Check my index this time. Yep. All right. If I take a look down inside, I should see oil holes lined up the same, in the same position. Yep. And same for the rear. Take a look at the front of the block. Here's the mark we made. That was my index reference. And we can see that oil hole lined up with the index mark all the way back through the block. So now I'm going to clean out the shavings from the cam bearings. See a little bit of shiny metal down there. I'll clean all that out. And I'm going to call this done. So I've slid the cam in place with timing gear in the front, being that the end play of the cam is dictated by the timing gear. I want to make sure that's all the way in the block, and I'm going to use that as a very unscientific way to determine if my cam bearings are in too far or not. And to me it looks as if though my rear is in too far, so I'm going to send it back out just a little bit so that the cam lobe itself, the journal, is riding completely on the bearing surface. And the others aren't too bad. They're off just, in my opinion, just a hair. I think the front's good. And let's gently tap this just a little bit. Let's see where that puts us. All right, that's a little bit better. I'll show you what I'm doing here. A little bit better. Maybe half of the distance I needed to get. But I don't want to keep banging these bearings back and forth, so I'll take it a little bit at a time. Yeah, it definitely needs to come forward just a little bit more. See where that got us. Got the cam back in place. It's a lot better. It's almost completely flush with the back of the cam journal. See how it looks down in the front. This one here. I'm happy with where that sits. It's pretty centered. And I'll check the rest and do the same.